everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is S.C. Coleman, author. In this video, we're going to be looking at a very interesting plan, I guess you could say, related to the transportation and control or logistical control of food. So before I get into the documents, let's start out by saying that in answering the question, who is the public enemy listed in contracts, I don't have a concrete answer or evidence directly, physically evidence-based answer. All I can say is that anecdotally, the idea is around rival organization specifically. So if you look at the use of the word public enemy, it originates in concept with the use of the word pirate. Now, pirate, the main idea behind a pirate, the caricature of a pirate, would be Blackbeard, Tortuga, the Bahamas, Port Royal, and various other beard color related entities or people. The coloring of the beard as a name, or the color of the beard for a name, not necessarily the coloring of, but just simply the color of it, as well as a beard shape to denote some type of character, was apparently primarily used with the Scandinavian quote-unquote Vikings. Another similar word usage for pirate, Viking and pirate. Despite the constant repetition that Viking is synonymous simply with seafaring Scandinavians, it is apparently a word for pirate. The idea of a pirate is that a pirate is somebody that goes around and robs people, similar to a highwayman, using weaponry, boarding ships, stealing supplies, etc. Well, that label, more often than not, has been used in a wide variety of applications for targeting purposes. We're, at this point, very familiar with the idea of a character assassination or labeling someone with the purpose of targeting them, desiring that others see that person in a false light because they are an enemy in some capacity. So it's essentially speaking lying with the motive of getting others to harass or otherwise antagonize someone or treat them in a bad way. So, the Barbary states, for instance, were not recognized as sovereign by the Crown or the Vatican or any of the standard, in most respects, illegitimate structures. So they would call them the Barbary pirates, and still do in textbooks and other things like that. Even though they weren't really pirates, they didn't fit that definition of just simple thieves. They were specifically targeting ships. They operated under a martial order and structure. They were in all respects organized more so than, say, just Christian quote-unquote pirates, quote Christian pirates, right? And there's different varieties, right? You use that label across the board, and it's similar to the way people use the word Nazi nowadays. They just simply throw it at something and hope it sticks. Or you call someone, it's name calling, basically. So public enemies appear to be used in the same type of way, And it has to do with a label for specifically organized opposition. Public enemy is applied to bootleggers, which is where we get our characterization of the mafia. Fictional character designed to target anybody who sells liquor without a license. And that's, of course, the big thing with the word public enemy being Al Capone, a fictional character used to equally not just solidify a rumor mill story about what happens to you and threat of force for selling liquor without a license, but equally, quote unquote, tax evasion, right? It is all done under duress. But I do believe that the public enemy in contracts does not have to do with a fictional character, even though that's used as a name-calling label, but rather some type of element with an organized structure and purpose, say for selling something or for or in some way will undercut the control of certain elements that exist today, specifically those writing the contracts, because we find the word public enemy used in very specific contractual contexts. So those people writing the contracts look at a public enemy as an organization which challenges their control with an organized aspect and, very importantly, some type of force mechanism. And this is important because essentially the phony FBI and all these other nimwits, the academics and attorneys and whatnot, they have their false characters of public enemies up there. Al Capone, Babyface Nelson, John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde, right? They have all these stories, and they've got Hollywood movies to back them up to confirm that they are in fact real people. They were, and they're legitimate. And of course, you got the Bonnie and Clyde Museum with a car that's got bullet holes in it, because people love stories, right? Either way, they can leverage those characters against someone or some organization, saying they're, quote, public enemies, as they did with the MAGA movement, right? Clear and present danger and a public enemy, right? However, getting into these documents that we're looking at here, we do have to understand that concept of the public enemy for the purposes of these documents, and not just simply the way that they use name calling as a tactic, a very childish tactic, but also how they set up fictions with the desire to make a fraudulent impact in reality, either against somebody or for some other purpose. This first document is a memorandum of agreement, Defense Supply Center Columbus and Richmond Forward Presence Positions. That language sounds like combat wording. Forward presence positions. The Defense Logistics Agency, hereinafter referred to as DLA, and the American Foundation of Government Employees Council 169, hereinafter referred to as the Council, hereby agrees to the following concerning continental United States CONUS forward presence positions attached to Defense Supply Center Columbus and Defense Supply Center Richmond. Locally negotiated operating procedures, LOCNOPs, for DSCC and DSCR will apply to their forward presence positions, except for those positions located at DLA sites authorized to negotiate a separate LOCNOP. Other forward presence sites covered by a LOCNOP other than the DSCC or DSCR LOCNOPs are Warner Robins not LOCNOP, Tinker Air Force Base, DDO LOCNOP, Philadelphia NAV ICP, DSC LOCNOP, and Ogden, Utah, DDHU LOCNOP. These four sites are covered by separate LOCNOPs as authorized by Article 38 of the Master Labor Agreement. Signed Frank D. Rienti, Jr., AFGE Council 169, and Jeffrey Neal, Director, Human resources for DLA. Human resources. Isn't that nice? Supply Center forward presence positions to be covered by LOCNOPS as reported to J 13th in September 2007. Defense Supply Center Richmond, DSCR. There's among the locations I have highlighted some: San Diego, California; Jacksonville, Florida; Cherry Point, North Carolina; Langley Air Force Base, Virginia; Norfolk, Virginia; and Corpus Christi, Texas. DSCC, Defense Supply Center Columbus. I just highlighted one here. Norfolk, Virginia. But there's quite a few of them. There's two in Pennsylvania, Letterkenny and Tobyhanna. And some others. Next thing we'll look at is a grant solicitation contract order for commercial items. Li Huan, or Huan Li, DHL 0005 name. Solicitation number is SPE Sierra Papa Echo 300-23-R or Romeo 0013. Requisition number 1000162106. Solicitation issue date is May 4th, 2023. Offer due date local time is June 5th, 2023. Or was. This is a RFP, which stands for Request for Proposal, and the majority of this is not filled out. It's always funny to me when I run into these people and they act like the most heinous of crimes you could commit is to deign to not fill out a form. And yet they don't even bother to do it themselves. Isn't that amazing? DLA Troop Support, Directorate of Subsistence, 700 Robbins Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 191111, USA. All right, and now they get into the continuation sheet where they have quite a lot of writing, but like I said, did not even bother to fill out the regular form. Okay, so I read the offer due date. There's two names listed on this form. Now, I don't know if those two names are the only people behind this form, which I doubt it, because this seems like a sort of standard copy and paste type of form. But they're probably just stuffed shirts who have very little to do in their life except act as paper pushers. Or they might not even be real people. At this point, it's hard to tell. Susan Williams and Robert Kane. Remittance will be made to the address that the vendor is listed in the System of Award Management Database, SAM. I'm familiar with that. And for authorized negotiators, there are listed none. The awardee will be required to have a computer system capable of accepting delivery orders and processing electronic data interchange EDI transactions. This contract will require the contractor to have electronic commerce / electronic data interchange EC/EDI capabilities. Rapid Gate Defense Biometric Identification System DBIDS requirement and or other security programs. We are currently estimate that Rapid Gate or DBIDS enrollment will cost about $250 per company and $200 per enrolled employee for 1 year of access to multiple locations, but the cost of RapidGate, DBIDS, or other security enrollment may vary, so the contractor should contact a specific security system contractor to determine its own costs. Doesn't sound like the military is controlling any of this. Note that enrollment can take several weeks, so an awardee that is not already enrolled must begin enrollment at the time of award notification at the latest. Well, isn't that nice? Defense Logistics Agency, DLA Troop Support Agency, tends to enter into an indefinite quantity contracts, IQC, with a commercial firm to supply fresh bread and bakery products to the Department of Defense, DoD, or troop customers in the Washington Zone. The aforementioned zone is comprised of two groups in the area described above. Group 1 consists of customers located at and or in Fort Lewis. Group 2 consists of customers located at and or in Navy ships in the state of Washington. Groups 1 and 2 in contract periods is expected to be from September 17th, 2023 through September 12th, 2026. The agency intends to award one contract per group. This solicitation is being issued as 13.5 unrestricted with HUBZone evaluation preference under full and open competition procedures. North American Industry Classification NAICS code is 311812 and the size standard is 1000. The solicitation utilizes the lowest price technically acceptable LPTA source selection process. It contains one 24-month and one 12-month tier period, hereafter individually referred to as tiers. The length of the contract is 36 months, 3 years, including all tiers. Estimated dollar value, guaranteed minimum/maximum. Group 1 Fort Lewis, Group 2 Navy, total. An offer that receives an award will be required to maintain electronic catalog stores that list all items available to the customers covered under this solicitation. If a customer seeks to order a bread and or bakery item that is not part of the catalog after the customer's ordering period commences, post-startup period, the contractor will be afforded a maximum of 10 days to source the item and have that item added to the ordering catalog. Adding customers within the contract's geographic distribution region/zone. After contract award, there may be instances when new customers requests support of their fresh bread and bakery requirements. This is the big deal within this contract. The ability to, at will, add, quote, new customers and conduct their usual sort of bait and switch type of strategy. Additional DoD and or non-DoD federal government customers, right, that request DLA troop support, fresh bread and bakery support may be added to the contract without any new acquisition or competition process. If the customers is/are within the geographic distribution region/zone covered by this contract. Isn't that interesting? The decision as to whether potentially new customers within the contract region or zone and thus will be added to the contract without further competition and at the existing contract prices shall be the sole decision of the DLA Troop Support contracting officer. Pursuant to the above, the contracting officer will instruct the contractor to include the customers at the effective contract prices applicable to that distribution zone/region. Under no circumstance may the resulting contract's maximum dollar value be exceeded within the addition of any customers and its respective bread and bakery requirements. The contractor shall treat each of the customers covered under the contract as one of its best customers. Troop and other customers conduct periodic food menu boards and similar meetings that the contractor may be required to attend. So obviously that has to do with the overall plan to shift and ultimately eradicate all military elements into the law enforcement designation, which will be subcontracted security guards. It is in fact a operation of warfare, a coordinated and planned operation of warfare. It is not simply some sort of fictional event being carried out by quote unquote communist forces, whatever the hell those are. Item availability. Contractors must have the ability to provide to the customers a range of bread and bakery items in sufficient quantities to fill all customer requirements and maintain the overall 9%, 70% contract fill rate. Blah, blah, blah. Products. Well, this is interesting here, this section. Delivery instructions. Contractors shall ensure all products are delivered in sanitary trucks that are of commercially acceptable standard. If applicable, all delivery trucks must be equipped with a lift gate to expedite the offloading of the products. Trucks shall maintain proper temperatures in accordance with standard commercial practices. Deliveries shall be FOB destinations. FOB, that is in fact a forward operating base. Destination to all delivery points. Delivery will be completed when the contractor has unloaded the orders from the vehicle and placed them on the dock, and customer receiving personnel has accepted delivery ticket in accordance with section 16 below, all items will be delivered to customer locations free of damage with all packaging and packing intact. Customers' delivery schedules, days and times, routes, and stop-off sequences will be coordinated and verified with the customers on a post-award basis by the contractor immediately following award and an annual basis as required. On average, each troop customer receives 1 to 3 deliveries per week. However, these schedules may be revised as necessary on a case-by-case basis at the approval of the contracting officer. Products for individual customers/dining facilities must be segregated. Many of the military bases have more than one delivery point. All products shall be segregated by drop-off point and loaded into the delivery vehicle in reverse drop sequence. The intent is to provide expeditious offloading capability and delivery to the customers. That does not sound like it's going to provide any sort of expeditious offloading capability to the customers. And I think it's interesting that they have to, down here at the bottom, define what their intent is, which leads me to believe that that in fact is not their intent. They have declared their intent here, so that way when somebody comes along and says, obviously you have a different intent behind this, they can say, no, we don't. See, we wrote it down. Because that's it. That's enough. That's all you need. Even if it's a lie, if it's written, it's valid. Quite ridiculous. Inspection and acceptance of products will be performed at destination. The inspection is normally limited to identity, count, and condition. However, this may be expanded if deemed necessary by either the veterinary inspector. Now, why would you have a veterinary inspector? That's kind of hard to say. Veterinary inspector. Now, why would you have a veterinary inspector verifying bread and baked items? Now, why would you be doing that? That makes no sense. So I would like it to make sense. Food Service Advisor Officer, delivery vehicles may be required to stop at a central location for inspection before proceeding to the assigned delivery points. Now that's interesting. The authorized government receiving officer at each delivery point is responsible for inspecting and accepting products as they are delivered. I wonder how many of them are veterinarians. All overages, shortages, returns are to be noted on the delivery ticket by receiving official and truck driver. All signatures must be legible along with the printed name and title block. Failure to adhere to these requirements may result in disputes going against that party, as its failure can severely limit the contracting officer's judgment. So as per usual, they treat it like it's the worst sin on the planet in history to not fill out a form. And yet they don't bother to fill out their own forms. That tells you all you need to know about forms. In the event an item is returned for any reason cited in section 16, the delivery ticket invoice shall be annotated as to the items rejected/returned. These items shall then be deducted from the delivery ticket invoice. The invoice total must be adjusted to reflect the correct dollar value of the shipment. Oh boy, it's so ridiculous. The redelivered items will be delivered under a separate invoice utilizing the same call number, contract line number, and purchase order number. Well, that doesn't sound like they're planning fraud. So you have an invoice that gets an invoice with the delivery that gets returned, and so that gets delivered again. So you make a separate one with all the same information. I think we all know what that leads to. In normal circumstances, that would lead to confusion, but in these circumstances, it is obviously done and planned on purpose so that way they can proliferate false documentation. In all cases, one copy of the credit memo is to be given to the customer, and one copy of the credit memo is sent to the DLA Troop Support Contracting Officer. No paper invoices shall be submitted to DFAS for payment for all orders placed via stores. Invoicing for payment is to be filed electronically using EDI transaction. Any changes must be made on the face of the delivery ticket/invoice. Attachments are not acceptable. For all internal debit/credit transactions must be completed prior to the submission of the invoice. For catch weight items, standard rounding methods must be observed. Although invoices must be submitted electronically via an 810 electronic invoice, the following address must appear on the bill to or payment will be made by block of the contractor's invoice. DFAS Columbus Center SL 4701. Attention DFAS BVDP, and it lists a P.O. Box 369031, Columbus, Ohio 43236. Now here's something interesting about this. In the next document, we're going to find out why it's so important that that unequivocally cannot be ignored, the fact that the contracting company is working through a quote-unquote government agency. Unless otherwise noted by the contractor, the contractor's Taylor Vendor Logistics Specialist, TVLS, or Customer Service Representative, CSR, will be the point of contact for emergency orders and will vet the appropriateness of such a request. And blah, blah, blah. Most of this doesn't have to do with anything. Attempt by third parties to tamper with it. As the holder of a contract with the Department of Defense, the contractor shall be aware of the vital role it plays in supporting the agency's customers. Here's another important line that's going to affect our next document. It is incumbent upon the contractor to take all necessary steps to secure product delivered to all applicable commercial destinations. And no, I'm not going to bother with any of that. Now, what's interesting about this document is that I'm not going to really read it, but the way that you file a claim and deal with a claim in the system appears to be established as purely automated. It's a complaint system. I think we're all familiar with complaint systems. You get on the phone with a robot with a particularly irritating and tedious menu system. When you finally get to a person, they don't even speak English. So ridiculous. Now, here's the force majeure contract clause. Even though it's listed as excusable delays, the contractor shall be liable for default unless non-performance is caused by an occurrence beyond the reasonable control of the contractor without its fault or negligence, such as acts of God or the public enemy. That's why I referenced that first. Acts of the government in either its sovereign or contractual capacity. I would disagree with that, but so would probably most people. But they don't really care whether you disagree with it or not. Fires, floods, epidemics, quarantine restrictions, strikes, unusual severe weather, and delays of common carriers. Patent indemnity. Risk of loss, termination for the government's convenience. I love this word use of the government, like it's some type of lofty entity that can simply go around and do whatever it wants because it's, quote, the government. Changes, contracting officer. The contractor and the government expressly agree that, in addition to any excess costs or repurchases or any other damages resulting from such default, the contractor shall pay and the government shall accept the sum of $1,350 as payment in full for the administrative cost of such repurchase. That seems rather ridiculous. That's a very specific number being used for an administrative cost. That sounds like a fee for paperwork processing, which not only is rather steep, but also seems a little ridiculous that they have indeed deigned to list a solid number on it simply for processing reasons. Now, the rest of this stuff in here might be interesting. It might be worthwhile, but for the case of making this video as short as I can. I'll just move on to the next document here. It is in the Supreme Court of Ohio, State ex rel, Alex Penland, Relator, versus Aramark Correction Service, LLC, Respondents. Original action in mandamus, case number 2024-0918, filed, allegedly, May 20th, 2025. Relator's merit brief. Now, I'll start out here by saying this is public theater. This is not real. There's no real people involved. There's no court drama going on. There's nobody showing up. It is simply 100% paperwork. The individual listed in here, Alex Penland, is based off of emails and emails alone. All you need to do is proliferate those emails and you have established your Alex Penland. Now, of course, if you call them on this farce, they will probably have some type of stuffed shirt, if necessary, to countermand it, possibly somebody going up and talking on a screen somewhere. Either way, there's a very particular purpose to this document specifically, and that is to legally establish precedent for contractors and subcontractors to be defined as a government agency. So essentially, essentially government will become completely and entirely private. Private corporations going around operating in the name blatantly as government. And so you take that document we just read, any contractor, and that's of course why you see those particular little details that they slip into the request for proposal document we just read about, Brett. Any contractor who has that DLA stamp, according to this document we're about to read, has the quote authorization, meaning it's been authored, to act in the capacity of the quote government. And let's see the real twisted way that they set that up. Verified complaint for writ of mandamus against Aramark Correctional Services, LLC. This is pretending, of course, to be contrary to Aramark, but is in fact attempting to establish the quote precedent for which Aramark can become a government entity outright. A revised verified writ of mandamus and revised memorandum in support of verified writ of mandamus, September 23, 2024, naming the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation's Corrections as an additional respondent. Respondents filed a motion to dismiss, alleging, among other things, that Aramark as a private company is not subject to the Ohio Public Records Act. Court denied respondents' motion to dismiss and granted an alternative writ. The original action in mandamus seeking the protection of multiple public records coming under the jurisdiction of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, ODRC, being the functional equivalency and or quasi-agency test via publicly funded contract wherein Ohio Department of Administrative Services via ODRC delegated its duty of feeding inmates housed in 25 Ohio prisons to Aramark Correctional Services, LLC, a private contractor pursuant to public contract, blah, blah, blah. It lists this person as a type 2 diabetic. Now, here's what's interesting. There's a line in here that sticks out. And usually when there's a line that sticks out, there's some other alternative reason for it. ODRC did engage the realtor in hogwash by stonewalling. It's an odd set of words to be using in this context. Such documents were under ODRC jurisdiction, but Aramark's control. It's a public records request, so-called. Public office, and here they define what public office is in this document. Public office includes any state agency, public institution, political subdivision, or other organized body, office, agency, institution, or entity established by the law of the state for the exercise of any function of government. ODRC is a public office. When a public office or person responsible for the records has failed to provide records in a reasonable time, mandamus is one appropriate avenue of relief within their ridiculous system, that is. To prevail on a claim for mandamus relief in a public records case, a party must establish a clear legal right to the requested relief and a corresponding clear legal duty on the part of the respondent to provide the relief. Now, understanding that the term legal means reduced to writing, specifically in this context with contracts, what exactly is a clear legal duty? Not simply a legal duty, not simply a duty that has been listed out in a paperwork, but a clear one. That's a good question. Does not define what exactly a clear legal duty nor a clear legal right is. It simply states it, no less. And naturally, this stuff is designed for when some attorney or secretary or office desk stuff certain written garbage, or possibly just fill in the blank nonsense, has citations on it. It will cite this type of material. Then a regular person seeing those citations on whatever their bogus summons or their nonsense is, Aramark summoning them to their offices for something, that person goes in and says they can't do this, and then they look at the citations and they go into this document, they will find that indeed, yes, those people can. And then most individuals will simply accept it and go along with it because that's what they're trained to do in the school system, and they will not look behind, in fact, or even determine whether or not the cited documents are legitimate themselves. The Ohio Supreme Court has developed two distinct tests to determine when a private party entity is subject to the public records law. The Ohio Supreme Court has held that a private entity may be the functional equivalent of a public office, where the court analyzes the following factors: whether the entity performs a governmental function. So say like a contractor for the Defense Logistics Agency or the, quote, Department of Defense. Even though those are cover identities if I've ever heard them. The level of government funding, contracts, right? The extent of government involvement or regulation, whether the entity was created by the government. So essentially you will have institutions like Aramark or a bread and baked goods delivery contractor for the Defense Logistics Agency writing and enforcing, quote, regulations with a force mechanism, or so-called law enforcement. ODRC Food Service Administration is responsible for providing food service to inmates remanded to the state prison system of Ohio. This includes inmates assigned to camp facilities. The DAS Office of Procurement Services, on behalf of the ODRC, did solicit a competitive sealed proposal for the operation and management of food service. Aramark was determined to be the highest ranking officer, color me surprised, or offer, and has been awarded a 5-year contract to feed 44,600 inmates, blah, blah, blah. The Supreme Court of the United States concluded that a physician under contract to provide medical services to inmates at a state prison was a state actor because his function could fairly be attributable to the state. And of course, that's the same logic and reasoning that they used to stipulate that subcontracted security guards who wear the sheriff and then possibly even the next day or on the same day a police uniform are simply carrying out a, quote, governmental function. They're not subcontracted security guards, they're law enforcement. No, they're actually subcontracted security guards. They have none of the original training of a full contract, quote, law enforcement officer of the past. But those people, in addition, were fraudulent to begin with. Aramark was the functional equivalent of a public office sufficient to compel compliance with the Public Records Act because it was performing a government function, was paid by the state of Ohio with public tax dollars. Considering the totality of the above factors, indeed, this honorable court should find that Aramark, being the persons responsible for creating and maintaining the public record in question, is the functional equivalent of a public office sufficient to compel compliance with the Public Records Act. And of course, we know what the future implications of that type of decision will be. And naturally, this is all part of the plan to establish a global law enforcement dominance based entirely off of privately run corporate entities and nonprofits. Aramark is creator and recipient of records relating to public duty. So now they're using the word their public duty, just like a clear legal duty. Now they're putting in public duty. So it sounds like they use the word clear legal duty, and now they have put in fact a clear legal duty in the terms of a public duty. This stuff is so moronic. In this case, the realtor demonstrated via documentary evidence that initially he sent his public records request via electronic email. Like I said, that's their evidence for the fact that this fraud exists in reality, and their emails. That's their legal evidence. Aramark's publicly funded contract is proof of a delegated duty. There we go again with that word duty. Now it's delegated. So now you got a clear legal duty. Now you got a public duty, and now we've got a delegated duty that satisfied the modified test acknowledgement in Aramatus, thereby placing upon the respondents a clear legal duty. There you go. To provide the requested public records, and said failure violates a duty specifically enjoyed by law. Since when is a duty an enjoyment? Stupid. Once information is in the public domain and the element of secrecy is gone, a trade secret is extinguished. That's something they said there. Public contract number CSP, that's Charlie Sierra Papa 900122, requires that at the end of the contract, all documents relating to the operation and management of food service must be turned over to ODRC, which further manifests that such documents are public records as they belong to the state of Ohio. So basically, a public record in this context has been redefined as property. It is not public in the context of being free and open to everyone. It is public as in being the property of, quote, public institutions. It is simply an arbitrary title and designation. It has absolutely nothing to actually be with public, and it is a word game that they're playing among many others. A well-formed public office reasonably would believe that the conduct that allegedly constitutes a failure to comply with an obligation based on the ordinary application of statutory law and case law as it existed at the time of the conduct, a well-informed public office reasonable would believe that its conduct would serve the public policy that underlies the authority that it is asserted as permitting that conduct. Aramark and ODRC thought the Public Records Act was a joke when they advised LOL, meaning laugh out loud. What strange language. Engaging in sarcasm by showing contempt of the Ohio Public Records Act. And here we've got two words they repeat, or they use, not necessarily repeat, but you have this word here, carte blanche, meaning white letter, and whitewash. Those interesting. Either way, the obvious intent behind this is to give credence to the idea that a private entity can go out without any checks at all and act in the functions of the government. Of course, the quote-unquote governments that we have are already private entities that act out the functions of a government without any true legitimacy whatsoever. This next thing is OASIS, Intensive Outpatient Treatment Program. Primary service location is listed as community. That's nice. Hamilton County Juvenile Courts OASIS program is designed to be an alternative to residential placement for probation involving youth demonstrating increasing levels of criminogenic risk and poor response to prior rehabilitative interventions. So this is an excuse. OASIS is an individualized and intensive outpatient treatment option that addresses the specific mental and behavioral health issues likely contributing to the youth's continued involvement in delinquent or high-risk behaviors. Let's find out what that high-risk behavior is, shall we? OASIS operates in collaboration with probation using a team-based approach to care and requires active participation of a parent/guardian. OASIS uses several evidence-based treatment curricula, including anger replacement training, cognitive behavioral interventions, that's brainwashing, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, so that sounds like torture, and the forward-thinking interactive journaling series. And this is the way these nasty types of people love to talk. They like to flower up their words for all of the awful things that they're planning on doing. OASIS targets, you like that word there, targets, male and female youth ages 12 through 19 who have mental health and behavioral issues. Of course, under race and ethnicity, this OASIS program, quote unquote, applies to 97.1% African American. April 28, 2024 was the program, 2015, my bad. That was the program start date. Among the program partners is, surprise, surprise, Aramark Food Services. So let's find out what that bad behavior they're attempting to change, and high-risk behavior actually is the word they used. Youth success story. Mikhail was referred to the OASIS program following adjudication for carrying a concealed weapon. That's it. That's all you need to know. This is, as per usual, a coordinated operation to sabotage and destroy the security of a free state, which, considering the fact that we do in fact have infringements on the right to keep and bear arms, we do not live in a free state, period. But behind this are more expansive and insidious plans and operations beyond just simple, even though I don't even want to say that, child harvesting. Child harvesting is one aspect, but they do indeed have long-term plans for the absolute decimation of the population at large. One of the requirements for that, of course, is to disarm people. And another requirement for that is to obtain logistical control of every important resource, such as food and water and air. And when I read these things, one phrase jumps to my mind, and that's of Tywin Lannister in the series Game of Thrones, when he says that soldiers march on their stomachs. Thank you.